The harsh, relentless sun of the Serengeti had just begun its descent, painting the vast plains in hues of molten gold and deep orange. But the beauty was lost on Dr. Elias Tembo. His gaze was fixed on the crimson droplets hitting the worn timber steps of his isolated research cabin. Not rain, but blood, dark and stark against the pale wood. A large lioness, Zola, stood utterly motionless at the foot of his steps, a living statue carved from tawny muscle and bone. In her mouth, impossibly, she cradled a small, limp form, her cub, Keto. Elias, a veteran field biologist with 15 years steeped in the brutal realities of the wild, had seen death in every conceivable form, but nothing had prepared him for this. He was frozen, every synapse firing, yet his body refused to obey. He watched, transfixed, as actual tears, thick and gleaming, tracked paths through the dust on Zola's scarred muzzle, catching the last light of day. Tears on a lioness. It defied every scientific principle he held sacred, every text he had ever read, a phenomenon so profound it threatened to unravel the very fabric of his understanding. Zola was instantly recognizable, not just to Elias, but to anyone who had followed his research. The distinct, jagged scar arcing over her right eye was her signature. She was the matriarch of the Golden Mane Pride, a group he had dedicated over a decade to studying, observing from a respectful, professional distance. Never in all those years had any wild animal, let alone a lioness, approached his cabin. It was an unspoken boundary, absolute and inviolable, until now. Keto was Zola's last surviving cub. Just weeks ago, 4 tiny bundles of fur had romped beside her. Now, 3 others had already succumbed to a mysterious respiratory illness that had swept through the cub population with alarming speed, a baffling mystery that had haunted Elias for months. "Another one, Zola? What is happening?" Elias whispered, the words barely audible against the vast silence of the savannah, a profound, chilling question echoing in his own mind. With an almost impossibly tender movement, Zola lowered her head, gently placing Keto not on the ground, but directly at Elias's feet. Her eyes, usually fierce and territorial, were now pools of raw desperation, fixed on his, pleading. The message was unspoken, yet blindingly clear. Help him. A cold dread seeped into Elias's bones, wrestling with a surge of something akin to paternal despair. His cardinal rule, the bedrock of his career, screamed in his head, never interfere. Nature must take its course. His career, his reputation, his entire life's work, all of it hung precariously in the balance. Breaking this protocol would be professional suicide, an unforgivable sin in the world of wildlife conservation. Then, a sound, thin and reedy, escaped the small, dying cub. Keto let out a pitiful, desperate mewl, a sound so fragile it shattered Elias's professional distance, cracking the ice around his heart. It wasn't just a sound. It was a plea from the edge of existence. "This is insane," Elias muttered, his voice hoarse, but his legs, surprisingly, began to move. Slowly, painstakingly, he descended the steps, preparing to approach a wild lioness, an act he would have deemed suicidal mere minutes ago. Zola's body tensed, a low growl rumbling deep in her chest, but she didn't move, didn't threaten. It was a sound of warning, yes, but beneath it, Elias perceived something else, something profound, a fragile, desperate trust. "She knows," Elias thought, astonished, a chill tracing a path down his spine. "She knows I am her last hope." He knelt beside the cub, his scientific training kicking in, momentarily overriding the surreal nature of the moment. Keto's labored breathing was shallow, ragged, and his small nostrils were crusty with mucus, unmistakable signs of severe pneumonia. But something about this cub, about this illness, felt different this time. The speed, the severity, the way it had targeted only the young, leaving the adults largely untouched. It wasn't just another opportunistic infection. He ran through the protocols in his head. The cub needed aggressive intervention, broad-spectrum antibiotics, subcutaneous fluids, and oxygen support. Treatment that was impossible out here. Treatment that would require him to commit the ultimate heresy, take Keto inside his cabin. "I'd need to take him inside," Elias said, the words addressed to Zola as if she could understand. He met her intelligent gaze directly, and for a fleeting moment he felt an understanding pass between them that transcended species. His scientific mind screamed madness, warning him of the irreparable damage this act could cause, not just to his career, but to the delicate balance he had always strived to maintain. Yet another deeper part of him, the very essence of his humanity, recognized a profound, unprecedented plea, a direct appeal from the wild, begging for a compassion usually reserved for his own kind. He cautiously reached for Quito, his hand trembling slightly, his fingers brushing the coarse fur. The unnatural heat of the cub's fever radiated through his glove, searing a new resolve into him. In that touch, Elias knew he had just crossed an irreversible line, not just for Quito, but for himself, for everything he believed. Inside the sterile, almost clinical environment of his research cabin, transformed into a makeshift veterinary clinic, Elias worked with a focused intensity. Quito, no bigger than a house cat but heavy with sickness, lay swaddled in a clean blanket on his examination table. Elias's gloved hands moved deftly, meticulously examining the cub, noting the rapid, shallow breaths, the wheezing cough that rattled its tiny frame, and the alarming pallor of its gums. The severity of the respiratory infection was undeniable, a brutal onslaught against such a fragile life. Through the cabin's large window, Zola remained, a sentinel in the twilight. Her amber eyes, piercing and unwavering, watched every movement Elias made. She sat patiently, an impossible vigil, her massive form a stark silhouette against the deepening savanna dusk. "She understands," Elias whispered, the words escaping him almost involuntarily, a profound realization taking root. "She understands what I'm doing." The tacit cooperation of a wild lioness defied all reason, yet here it was, a tangible presence in the quiet space between man and beast. Elias administered a potent dose of broad-spectrum antibiotics, injecting the fluid into the cub's scrawny flank. Next, with practiced hands, he set up a rudimentary IV drip, suspending a small bag of lactated Ringer's solution from a hook on the ceiling. Every action felt monumental, weighted with the unprecedented nature of his decision. He was not just treating an animal, he was shattering decades of scientific dogma, crossing an ethical boundary that most biologists would never dare to approach. "He's fighting, Zola," Elias murmured, looking up, his gaze finding the lioness's unwavering eyes in the window. A strange, powerful bond was solidifying in the silence between them, a connection forged in desperation that defied all logical explanation. He then took a blood sample from Quito's small leg, a routine diagnostic procedure meant to confirm the presence of bacterial infection. But as the centrifuge spun and the first results flickered onto his screen, something immediately struck him as profoundly, chillingly odd. The cub's blood showed elevated levels of an unknown compound, a biomarker unlike any natural pathogen he had ever encountered in the Serengeti. It wasn't bacterial, viral, or parasitic in any way he recognized. What is this?" Elias muttered, leaning closer to the microscope, his brow furrowed in concentration. He compared the spectral analysis to his extensive database of known toxins and biological agents, but found no match. "This isn't natural." The words hung heavy in the air, a chilling premonition. He ran the diagnostics again, rechecking, recalibrating, but the biomarker was undeniably present, a foreign signature in Quito's fragile system. Its chemical structure hinted at an artificial, perhaps even synthetic origin. This was no ordinary pneumonia. This was a chilling discovery, a horrifying anomaly that went far beyond natural illness. Disturbing questions swirled in his mind about its source. "This explains why the others died so fast," he realized, the pieces of a darker puzzle beginning to click into place. The rapid, brutal efficiency of the illness, the way it targeted only the vulnerable cubs, now had a terrifying new context. Elias carefully sealed and labeled the blood samples, storing them in a cryo chamber. A growing sense of dread mixed with his fierce determination to save Quito. He couldn't shake the chilling thought. What if this illness that had so mercilessly wiped out Zola's other cubs wasn't an act of nature at all? What if it was something far more sinister, perhaps even man-made? The very thought was a betrayal of everything he believed about the untamed wild, yet the evidence was irrefutable. Outside, Zola let out a soft, mournful moan, a low rumble that vibrated through the cabin walls, as if sensing Elias's turmoil, or perhaps the fragile state of her cub. It was a sound that cemented his resolve. Elias looked down at the tiny, struggling cub, then back at the formidable lioness in the window. "I will save Keto," he promised himself, his voice a fierce whisper, "and then I will find out what caused this unnatural affliction." The cub's survival had become inextricably intertwined with a burgeoning mystery, one that challenged his very understanding of the wilderness. He felt a growing, unsettling conviction that saving Keto was only the first step in uncovering a deeper, darker secret that lurked beneath the pristine facade of the Serengeti. Over the next 72 hours, Keto's recovery was nothing short of remarkable. The cub, initially a limp, feverish bundle, began to regain its strength with astonishing speed. His labored breathing eased into soft purrs, the fever finally broke, and his appetite, once non-existent, returned with a vengeance. Elias, exhausted but exhilarated, found himself marveling at the resilience of life, even as he battled the constant internal conflict of his unprecedented intervention. Throughout it all, Zola remained. She would disappear only for brief, efficient hunts, always returning by morning, her massive form a comforting, watchful presence outside the cabin window. Her patience was unwavering, a testament to her profound hope. "She trusts me," Elias realized, a humbling revelation that deepened the unusual bond between them. On the fourth morning, with the first light painting the savanna in soft pastels, Elias carried a visibly stronger Keto outside. "He's gonna make it, Zola," he said, his voice thick with emotion, placing the cub gently between them on the sun-warmed earth. Keto let out a small, happy chirp, sniffing the familiar air. Zola approached with a slow, deliberate grace, her powerful paws making no sound. She nudged Keto tenderly with her muzzle, a soft rumble emanating from her chest. Then she lifted her head, her amber eyes locking with Elias's. In that sustained gaze, he felt a profound, undeniable wave of gratitude, a silent thank you that needed no words, no human translation. It was a moment of pure, raw connection, utterly unforgettable. As Zola and Keto, now scampering weakly but with growing confidence, disappeared into the tall grass, Elias felt a profound physical and emotional exhaustion wash over him. But beneath it pulsed a fierce, almost primal protectiveness for the small cub and, by extension, for the delicate ecosystem he had sworn to protect. Back inside, the quiet of the cabin amplified the hum of his equipment. He immediately returned to his notes on the mysterious biomarker in Keto's blood. His scientific brain, now untethered from the immediate crisis of saving a life, began to analyze. The data was unequivocal. This was no natural occurrence. This wasn't an accident, he muttered, a cold certainty settling in his gut. The unnatural compound, its synthetic signature unmistakable, pointed to a deliberate or at least negligent human origin. Elias began a discreet but urgent investigation. He started cross-referencing recent environmental data from his sensors with any unusual human activity reports in the greater Serengeti region. His focus narrowed to industrial sites, agricultural operations, and any other human footprint that might introduce such a substance into the wild. He recalled anecdotal reports from park rangers about strange, iridescent residues observed near a remote river tributary several months ago. At the time, they had been dismissed as unusual, natural mineral deposits, but now they took on an ominous significance. He considered the disturbing possibilities: illegal agricultural runoff, contaminated with advanced pesticides, industrial dumping of toxic waste, or even the clandestine operations of an unauthorized research facility experimenting with biological agents. "The source has to be human," he concluded, his jaw tight. The implications of this chilling discovery began to unfold, terrifying in their scope. What if this illness, this unnatural affliction, wasn't isolated to Zola's pride or even to this specific area? What if it was a widespread biohazard threat, silently spreading through the delicate ecosystem, capable of wiping out not just cubs, but entire populations? A subtle unease settled over Elias's usually peaceful research area. He began to feel watched, a prickling sensation on the back of his neck. He found himself checking his perimeter sensors more frequently, scanning the horizon with a heightened sense of vigilance. He realized with a heavy heart that his actions to save Keto and his subsequent investigation into this unnatural affliction might be putting him on a dangerous path, a path that could lead him to confront powerful shadowy forces. I can't ignore this, he resolved, the personal cost irrelevant against the potential catastrophe. Occasionally, Zola and her pride were spotted, not just Zola, but the entire pride. Closer to his cabin than ever before, their collective gazes unusually direct, not hostile but observant, almost as if keeping an eye on him. "They're watching, aren't they?" Elias murmured to himself, staring out at the vast, silent plains. He sensed a profound shift in the delicate balance of the wild. The quiet gratitude of a lioness had opened a door, not just to a scientific enigma, but to a far more dangerous human-made mystery stretching far beyond the realm of scientific observation. The familiar roar of the bush plane heralded the return of Dr. Lena Makunga, Elias's senior assistant. Lena, in her early 30s, possessed a sharp intellect, keen observational skills, and a practical demeanor honed by years in the field. Her dark skin gleamed, her braided hair pulled back neatly as she stepped out of the aircraft in her usual practical field attire. Her initial reaction to Elias's extraordinary tale of Zola and Keto was, predictably, a mix of skepticism and concern for Elias's mental state. "Elias, are you absolutely sure about this?" she asked, her brow furrowed as he recounted the events, knowing how outlandish it sounded. Elias didn't argue. Instead, he led her to his console, displaying the meticulous notes and, crucially, the short, shaky video footage he'd managed to capture of Zola bringing Keto to his steps. As the images flickered across the screen, the desperate lioness, the tiny, suffering cub, and the undeniable tears, Lena's skepticism dissolved into palpable awe. "I don't believe what I'm seeing," she whispered, her voice barely audible, her eyes wide with a mixture of wonder and disbelief. Then Elias presented the lab results, the detailed spectral analysis confirming the unknown biomarker in Keto's blood. Lena's expression, usually calm and analytical, turned grim. She studied the complex molecular structure for a long moment, her fingers tracing the lines on the screen. This is synthetic, Elias," she stated, her voice tight with concern. "This is highly unusual, Elias. A synthetic compound here in the heart of the Serengeti?" She scrutinized the data again, recognizing the sheer gravity of what they were seeing. This shouldn't be possible. Their collective attempts to access more detailed environmental records or official incident reports for the region were met with an immediate, frustrating wall of bureaucracy. Emails went unanswered, phone calls were rerouted, and official requests were mysteriously delayed or outright denied. "Our requests are being denied," Lena observed, her tone hardening, consistently and without explanation. Then came a subtle but unsettling email from the Tanzanian Wildlife Authority. It wasn't an accusation, but a thinly veiled warning questioning Elias's unorthodox methodologies and unverified claims of unnatural illness. It was a clear, unambiguous message: back off. "They're trying to shut us down," Lena stated, her eyes narrowed, now seeing beyond mere bureaucracy. This felt like a deliberate attempt at a corporate cover-up or something far deeper and more sinister. Undeterred, Elias and Lena decided to take matters into their own hands. They discreetly investigated the remote river tributary Elias had initially suspected. It took days of careful tracking, but they eventually found traces of unusual industrial runoff, a faint iridescent sheen on the water, a chemical smell alien to the savanna. It was undeniably not natural. Their covert excursions also brought another unsettling discovery. They began to notice new, unmarked heavy-duty vehicles, SUVs and pickup trucks, not typical safari or ranger vehicles, patrolling the perimeter of their research zone. Their presence was unnerving, out of place, and their occupants seemed to watch the cabin with an unnerving intensity. "Who are these people?" Lena wondered aloud, her unease growing. Amidst this rising tension, an unexpected ally emerged. Zola's pride, especially the experienced adult females, began to patrol closer to Elias's cabin than ever before. Their presence felt deliberate, their low growls and territorial roars now seemingly warning off anything unusual or human-made that strayed too close. It was as if they understood the burgeoning threat. Elias felt the direct pressure mounting, a palpable weight on his shoulders. His chilling discovery had exposed something powerful and dangerous, something that wielded influence far beyond the savanna. This isn't just about keto anymore, he said to Lena, the cub's survival now a catalyst for a larger, more perilous truth. Someone doesn't want us to know what's in that water, Elias reiterated, his voice firm, their shared suspicion solidifying into conviction. The line between protecting the wildlife he cherished and uncovering a human secret began to blur, drawing them deeper into a peril they hadn't anticipated. Lena, with her exceptional research skills, worked tirelessly through the night. She delved into obscure corporate registries, cross-referencing names and addresses. Finally, she found it, a shell corporation registered in a distant financial hub with intricate ties to a major pharmaceutical firm. This firm was operating locally under a different, innocuous name, seemingly engaged in routine agricultural research. A phantom company, Lena declared, her finger hovering over the screen, the implications dawning on them. This shadowy connection, carefully concealed and intricately woven, strongly suggested a deliberate attempt to hide unethical activities in the park, hinting not at an accident but at a classified incident, perhaps an experiment gone terribly wrong, or worse, something entirely intentional. If you've been following Elias and Lena's harrowing journey, you know their pursuit of the truth has led them down a dangerous path. But what they uncover next will shock you to your core and plunge them into immediate, life-threatening danger. If you want to see how this incredible conspiracy unfolds, make sure to hit that like button, share this video with everyone you know, and subscribe so you don't miss a single crucial detail of this thrilling saga. The return to Elias's cabin was not a homecoming but an invasion. The heavy wooden door stood ajar, splintered where it had been forced. Inside, their sanctuary of scientific pursuit had been systematically desecrated. Research notes were scattered across the floor, tables overturned, delicate equipment smashed. A clear, menacing message was scrawled on the wall in crude paint. "Stop looking." "They were here," Lena whispered, her voice laced with fear and disgust as she surveyed the wreckage. Elias's caution, his inherent scientific detachment, was replaced by a cold, righteous fury, his hands clenched into fists. "They know we're onto them," he stated, his voice low, guttural. "We're not safe." The sense of violation was profound, a direct challenge to their very existence. As night fell, a new, unsettling symphony echoed across the savannah. Zola's roars, usually a distant sign of territorial dominance, now resonated with an unnerving proximity, a fierce, almost deliberate defense against unseen intruders. They never saw the shadows lurking outside, but they felt them. The heavy footfalls that crunched on dry leaves just beyond the cabin, the faint glint of moonlight on something metallic. The lions, it seemed, were standing guard. With their cabin compromised and their lives clearly at risk, Elias and Lena knew they couldn't rely on official channels. They decided to go off-grid. Stripping down their gear to the essentials, they vanished into the bush, relying on their decades of field experience and formidable tracking skills. Their mission? To find the source of the contamination directly. Days of arduous silent tracking led them deep into a restricted zone of the park, in an area supposedly untouched. There, hidden from aerial view by dense canopy and clever camouflage, they discovered it. A hidden access road clearly recently used by heavy vehicles leading to a heavily guarded compound. Through their high-powered binoculars, Lena gasped. "This isn't a mineral deposit, Elias. This is a fortress," she whispered, her voice filled with dread. High fences topped with razor wire security cameras and armed guards patrolled the perimeter. This was no ordinary research facility. It was an impenetrable stronghold. From a strategic vantage point, they watched in horror as a truck backed up to the river tributary. Men in protective suits, their faces obscured, began to offload barrels, large metallic containers, clearly marked with international biohazard symbols. They were illegally dumping the contents directly into the pristine waters of the Serengeti. "The proof," Elias breathed, his heart sinking with a terrible certainty. Suddenly, a crackle over a distant radio followed by the distant crunch of boots. A patrol was heading their way. Their position, carefully chosen, was about to be compromised. But then an impossible thing happened. Zola's distinct roar ripped through the air, followed by a chorus of growls and snarls from her pride. They weren't just roaring, they were orchestrating a distraction. The lions launched a coordinated feint, drawing the guards away from Elias and Lena's hiding spot, their powerful charges and strategic movements creating a diversion that bought the scientists precious moments. That was no coincidence, Elias said, witnessing the lion's intelligent, coordinated maneuver, a breathtaking display of instinct and purpose. They're helping us. Seizing the opportunity, they crept closer, risking everything. They managed to collect samples of the dumped waste, the vile liquid seeping from a cracked barrel, and capture irrefutable photographic evidence of the corporate cover-up. Back at a makeshift camp under the cloak of darkness, Elias quickly analyzed the waste sample. The results were immediate, terrifyingly conclusive. The biomarker in Keto's blood was a perfect, undeniable match for the synthetic compound found in the illegally dumped waste. It's a perfect match, Elias confirmed, his voice devoid of emotion, hardened by the truth. The chilling realization slammed into them both. The respiratory illness wasn't an act of nature or mere negligence. It was a deliberate, unethical bioweapon test, or industrial contamination, impacting wildlife for profit, a horrifying disregard for life. The pharmaceutical firm operating under its phantom company was responsible. The sheer scale of the deception, the cold calculation, and the potential impact on the entire Serengeti ecosystem sent shivers down their spines. This wasn't just about a few cubs. It was about the deliberate poisoning of a vital, natural wonder. They now possessed undeniable proof of a classified incident, a brutal and illegal operation by a powerful entity willing to sacrifice entire species for their clandestine agenda. The weight of their discovery was immense. They were no longer just scientists observing nature. They were whistleblowers, holding the fate of the Serengeti in their hands, facing a dangerous, invisible enemy with limitless resources and no conscience. If you've been following Elias and Lena's harrowing journey, you know their pursuit of the truth has led them down a dangerous path. But what they uncover next will shock you to your core and plunge them into immediate life-threatening danger. If you want to see how this incredible conspiracy unfolds, make sure to hit that like button, share this video with everyone you know, and subscribe so you don't miss a single crucial detail of this thrilling saga. With irrefutable proof in hand, Elias and Lena knew there was no turning back. "There's no turning back now," Elias stated, his voice calm despite the monumental risks. The weight of exposing a powerful, ruthless corporation was immense, but the alternative, silence and continued destruction, was unthinkable. They arranged a clandestine meeting with a trusted independent journalist known for investigative tenacity, planning to leak their explosive evidence to the world. As they drove their battered Land Rover towards the rendezvous point under a sky still bruised with pre-dawn darkness, two unmarked, heavy-duty vehicles swerved out of the tall grass, boxing them in. Armed guards, the same faces they'd seen patrolling near the clandestine facility, emerged from the vehicles, weapons raised. "We knew you'd come out," one of them snarled. A stern-faced, corporate-looking man in a tailored suit stepped forward, his eyes devoid of emotion. "Dr. Tembo, Dr. Makunga, we need to have a little chat about your unauthorized research." Their evidence, the samples, the photos, the meticulously compiled lab results, was immediately confiscated. They were driven to a remote, desolate clearing, their lives threatened to maintain the deep state secrets that had been meticulously buried. "No one will believe you," the corporate man sneered, convinced of their ultimate power. Just as despair began to settle in, a low rumble vibrated through the ground. Then the unmistakable roars of Zola's pride erupted from the surrounding bush, a terrifying chorus that sent a primal chill down the spines of the armed guards. Before anyone could react, the lions charged. It wasn't a random attack, it was a strategic, coordinated assault. Zola, leading the charge, went for the corporate man, her powerful body pinning him down without lethal intent, merely incapacitating. Other lions targeted the guards, swiping at their weapons, tearing at their uniforms, creating absolute chaos. "They saved us," Lena gasped, scrambling for cover, her eyes wide with shock and awe as she witnessed the lions' strategic intervention. It was an act of unprecedented intelligence and gratitude, a truly bewildering alliance. "It's an alliance." Elias, stunned but clear-headed, knew this wasn't just about Keto anymore. This was Zola's pride, an entire lineage protecting their home, and by extension him, as a part of that home. They understand, he murmured, retrieving their precious evidence from the chaos, a profound understanding dawning within him. They escaped, delivering their comprehensive evidence, the videos of the dumping, the lab results confirming the synthetic biomarker, the photos of the clandestine facility, to the journalist, who, with trembling hands, promised to publish immediately. The news broke like a thunderclap across global headlines. Pharmaceutical giant exposed in Serengeti biohazard scandal. The meticulously crafted corporate cover-up unraveled, implicating high-level officials and exposing a horrific disregard for life. The clandestine facility was raided, arrests were made, and the corporation's unethical, deadly activities were brought to light. Justice for Quito and the Serengeti, Elias thought, a quiet satisfaction mixing with a profound sadness for what had been lost. Elias and Lena faced immediate professional backlash, their unconventional methods scrutinized, their careers questioned. But this was quickly overshadowed by widespread public support and global acclaim. They were hailed as heroes, their courage and dedication a beacon of hope for wildlife conservation. Months later, the scars on the Serengeti began to heal. Elias, once again observing from a respectful distance, watched Zola and a thriving, playful Quito. The cub was strong, a testament to an impossible rescue. Zola, ever vigilant, lifted her head. Her amber eyes met his across the vast plains, a silent, powerful acknowledgement of their extraordinary, unseen alliance. The natural world and human conscience had, against all odds, united to fight a shadow organization, forever changing Elias's understanding of wild intelligence and human responsibility. End. The image of Zola, a massive lioness, her eyes locked on his, actual tears streaming down her face as she laid her dying cub Quito at his feet, was forever seared into Elias Tembo's memory. It defied everything he knew about wildlife behavior after 15 years in the Serengeti, challenging every scientific doctrine. In that moment, faced with the desperate intelligence in her amber eyes, he broke every cardinal rule, choosing compassion over protocol. That single, unbelievable act, a wild creature seeking human help, unleashed a chain of events far more sinister than any natural illness. What began as a desperate plea quickly unmasked a horrifying biohazard threat, a synthetic compound poisoning the heart of the wilderness. Elias and Lena's relentless investigation, met with corporate threats and official stonewalling, unearthed a classified incident, a powerful pharmaceutical giant operating a clandestine dumping ground. Their lives became targets, but the same extraordinary intelligence that brought Quito to his door now rallied to their defense. Zola and her pride and unforeseen alliance strategically protected them, guiding them through peril, ultimately securing the evidence that shattered the corporate cover-up. The expose shook the world, bringing down a shadow organization and holding the powerful accountable. Elias, forever changed, now saw the Serengeti not just as a subject of study, but as a living, intelligent entity capable of profound connection. The silent gaze shared with Zola, a thriving Quito by her side, was a testament to a world where human conscience and wild instinct had converged to fight a darkness, forever redefining humanity's place within it.